everyone, we are back with our fourth YouTube video here in ACCAFE Express entitled ACCAFE Express Break-Even Analysis Report. So along with me in this video is Noriat Alisoso, our Managing Director, Lionel Caballas, our Business Development Director, and yours truly, the CEO, Andrea Bernardino. We've created this PowerPoint slide or this report along with Christine Cahinta, our Marketing Director, and Jamie Kahambing, our Chief Financial Officer. So we hope that you stay tuned along with this video, and we hope that you learn a lot and you'll be able to understand the break-even of our business, the break-even units, and the break-even in pesos. So thank you so much. We hope you will have fun and you will learn a lot of things. Thank you. So in this video, we will be discussing the break-even analysis of our business. We will compute the break-even in units and the break-even in pesos. So to start, that for our business, we have constructed a contribution income statement. So here you can see that the sales for our seven products in ACCAFE Express, namely Cafe Americano, Latte Monday, ACCAFE Signature Coffee, Coffee Caramel, ACCAFE Pretzels, Beef Overload Bun, and Nacho Fries. So here we have a sales of 4,492,800 for Cafe Americano, 5,426,800 for Latte Monday, 6,048,000 for ACCAFE Signature Coffee, 4,680,000 for Coffee Caramel, 864,000 for ACCAFE Pretzels, and 1,382,400 for Beef Overload Bun, and Nacho Fries with 864,000, with a total of 23,760,000 for the sales. So for our variable expense, we have Cafe Americano 2,620,800, Latte Monday 4,176,000, ACCAFE Signature Coffee 4,968,000, Coffee Caramel 3,600,000, ACCAFE Pretzels 648,000, and Beef Overload Bun 1,123,200, and Nacho Fries 460,800, with a total of 17,596,800 for our variable expense. So to compute the total contribution margin is that we deduct the sales 27,600,000 by the variable expense of 17,596,800. So we get a contribution margin of 6,163,200 less the fixed expense 3,411,360. We get a net operating income of 2,751,840. So for the next slide is that we have the total of the sales, variable expenses, contribution margin, and fixed expense, and we get a net operating income of 2,751,840, which we have identified. So here we have, we will explain the schedules of each component. Example, for the sales, we have different unit sales for each product. The Cafe Americano, Latte Monday, ACCAFE Signature Coffee, Coffee Caramel, ACCAFE Pretzels, Beef Overload Bun, and Nacho Fries. So we have a unit sales of 120, 130, 140, 130, 60, 80, and 75 respectively. So here is that we predict that for the daily operations of ACCAFE Express, we predict that there will be 130 units that will be sold, and that will tantamount to a monthly units of 130 times 24 days, which we will be operating. So that will be 3,120. So annually times 12, we get 37,440. So to compute the monthly sales, for example, for Cafe Americano, is we have the selling price 120 multiplied by the monthly units that we predict that will be sold, that is 3,120. So we get the monthly sales for Cafe Americano of 374,400. To get the annual sales, we just need to multiply it by 12 months, which is 4,492,800. The same goes with the rest of the products. Like we have identified the selling price, like for example 130 for Latte Monday. Then we assumed the daily units to be sold for that specific product, the monthly units sold, the annual units sold, and then we multiply those number of units depending on whether it is monthly or annually. Next will be the variable expense. So for the variable expense, we have computed unit costs, variable cost per unit for Cafe Americano 70. Then we have the daily units sold, monthly units sold, annual units sold. Then we multiply again the unit cost or variable cost per unit by the monthly units sold, which is 3,120 multiplied by 70, we get 218,400. Then we multiply it by 12 months, we get 2,620,800. So that will be the same way of solving for the other products for the variable expense. Schedule number 2 for variable expenses, the components of variable expenses, because different products, of course, have different variable expenses. So for Cafe Americano, we have the raw material items, coffee beans with an amount of 30 per unit, purified water 5 per unit, coffee cup 20 per unit, paper straw 10 per unit, tissue 5 per unit, and variable cost per unit of Cafe Americano will be 70. Next will be Latte Monday, 30 per unit for coffee beans, 20 per unit for the milk, 15 per unit for the vanilla flavor, 20 per unit for the coffee cup, 10 per unit for the paper straw, 5 per unit for the tissue, with a total of variable cost per unit for Latte Monday of 100. Next will be the ACCAFE Signature Coffee, 30 for the coffee beans, 20 for the milk per unit, 15 for the flavor syrup per unit, 15 for the cinnamon per unit, 20 for the coffee cup per unit, 10 for the coffee cup per unit, and 5 for the coffee cup per unit, with a total variable cost per unit of 115. By the way, the unit of measurement of the currency rather used here is the Philippine peso. So next will be the coffee caramel, 30 per unit for the coffee beans, 20 per unit for purified for the milk rather, and we have 15 per unit for the caramel syrup, 20 per unit for the coffee cup, 10 per unit for the paper straw, 5 per unit for the tissue, with a total variable cost per unit of 100 for coffee caramel. Now we go with non-coffee or non-beverages. We have the ACCAFE pretzels, 20 per unit for the pretzels, 10 per unit for the sugar, 15 per unit for the chocolate fudge, with a total variable cost per unit of 45 for ACCAFE pretzels. Next is for the beef overload, 30 per unit for bread or the bun, 20 per unit for the beef bacon, 15 per unit for the condiments, with a total variable cost per unit of 65. Next will be nacho fries. We have 15 per unit for the frozen fries, 15 per unit for the nachos, and 10 per unit for the cheese. We have a total of 40 per unit variable cost per unit for the nacho fries. Then we have the schedule number 3 for the fixed expense. Our fixed cost, we have identified here, computed here, monthly and annually. Annual fixed cost and monthly fixed cost. So for our fixed costs, we have salaries expense, under which is the salary for the manager accountant with an amount of 23,000, salary for barista, 14,000, salary for cashier, 11,500, salary for maintenance personnel, 13,000. The total is for salaries expense. For our employees, we have 61,500 monthly multiplied by 12. 61,500 multiplied by 12, we get 738,000. Then next, we have the advertising expense. Our advertising expense, we have identified as stipend for hired local influencers, which is social media marketing, with an amount of 20,000. Facebook advertisements, pay-per-click subscription, 50,000, with a total amount of 70,000 for advertising expense, and annual expense of it will be 840,000. Just multiply it by 12 months. Next will be the depreciation expense, 124,000 for our equipment. And we get annual depreciation expense of 1,488,000. Next will be insurance expense, 6,000 multiplied by 12, 72,000. Insurance will be those for our employees, and for our car or the coffee truck itself. License and permits. So we have 7,500 monthly multiplied by 12, 90,000. Annually. So next would be the fuel, 5,280 multiplied by 12, 63,360. Repairs and maintenance, 10,000 multiplied by 12, 120,000. So you add all the fixed expenses for the salaries expense, advertising expense, and depreciation, insurance, license, fuel, repairs, and maintenance, and you get in a total fixed cost per period monthly, specifically 284,280. So just for our annual fixed expense, just multiply that by 12, which is 3,411,360. So That will be all for my part. Next is Norian Alisoso, who will report the break-even point in unit sales. Thank you.
Going now to the main discussion of our break-even analysis, we have here the break-even point in unit sales. ACCAFE Express is a multi-product company since it sells multiple products. So in computing for the break-even point in unit sales among multi-product companies, we have 3 steps. So the first one is to get the contribution margin per unit for each product. Second is to compute for the weighted average contribution margin per unit for each product also. And last step is to compute for the break-even point for each product. So in the first step, we can get the contribution margin per unit by deducting the variable cost per unit from the selling price. So in this particular slide, we can see the multiple products being sold by the ACCAFE Express. For Cafe Americano, its contribution margin per unit is 50. How did we get that? We deducted 70 pesos or the variable cost per unit of this particular product from its selling price of 120. The same also goes for Latte Monday. Its selling price of 130 pesos less variable cost of 100 is equal to 30. For ACCAFE Signature Coffee, 140 less 115 will give us a 25 pesos contribution margin per unit. For Coffee Caramel, 130 less 100 will result to 30 pesos. ACCAFE Pretzels, 60 pesos selling price less its variable cost per unit of 45 will give us 15 as its contribution margin per unit. Beef overload bun selling price 80 pesos less variable cost of 65 is equal to 15 cm per unit. Last but not the least, nacho fries 75 pesos selling price less 40 pesos variable cost will give us a 35 peso cm per unit. Now that we have done the first step, we now proceed to the second step, which is the computation for the weighted average cm per unit of each product. So we have here the formula in getting weighted average cm per unit. This can be computed by multiplying cm per unit by the annual units per product over the total units. So to apply, Cafe Americano has a cm per unit of 50 pesos. So the total units for the multiple products is 201,600. 37,440 is attributed to Cafe Americano. Thus, to compute its weighted average cm per unit, we multiply 50 pesos by 37,440 over 201,600, which results to 9 pesos. Latte Monday, cm per unit of 30 pesos multiplied by 41,760 over 201,600 will provide us a weighted average cm per unit of 6. For ACCAFE Signature Coffee, cm per unit is 25 multiplied by 43,200 over 201,600 is equal to 5. Coffee Caramel, 30 cm per unit times 36,000 over 201,600 will result to 5. For ACCAFE Pretzels, 14 201,400 over 201,600 multiplied by its CM per unit of 15 is equal to 1. Beef overload van, 15 pesos na CM per unit multiplied by 17,280 over 201,600 is also equal to 1. Nacho fries, our last product, has a CM per unit of 35 pesos multiplied by 11,520 over 201,600 is equal to 2. Note that all of this weighted average CM per unit is rounded to the nearest peso. So we have here a total weighted average CM per unit of 31 pesos. Going now to our last step, the computation for the break-even point in unit sales for each product. But before that, we will still compute for the break-even point in unit sales as a whole. So to compute for that, we will divide our fixed expenses by the total weighted average CM per unit, which was computed earlier. So to compute, 3,411,360 is our fixed expenses, divided by the total weighted average CM per unit of 31 will result to a break-even point in units of 110,044. Now that we have determined the total break-even point in units as a whole, we would now get the break-even point in units for each product. But how do we do that? So we will compute for that by multiplying the break-even point in units as a whole by the annual unit per product over the total annual units. So to apply for Cafe Americano, we have here a break-even point in units of 20,437. But how do we get that? So basically, we would use the 110,044 that we have computed earlier. Since 110,044 was our computed break-even point in units as a whole. So this is to be multiplied by the annual unit per product over the total annual units, which in Cafe Americano's case is 37,440 over 201,600. Multiplying it to 110,044 will give us 20,437. So that is how. Next, for Latte Monday, again, we use the 110,044 break-even point in units, then multiply it to 41,760 over 201,600, giving us a result of 22,795. The same also goes for ACCAFE Signature Coffee. 110,044 multiplied by 43,200 over 201,600. For coffee caramel, 36,000 over 201,600 multiplied by 110,044 will give us 19,651 break-even point in units. ACCAFE pretzels, 14,400 times 201,600 or 14,400 over 201,600 rather, multiplied by 110,044 will give us 7,860 break-even point in units for that particular product. For beef overload bun, 110,044 multiplied by 17,280 over 201,600 is equal to 9,432. For nacho fries, 110,044 multiplied by 11,520 over 201,600 will give us 6,288 BEP, or break-even point in units for that particular product. So again, just like in the computation of weighted average contribution margin per unit, we get the total or the answer in nearest unit. So it is rounded to the nearest unit. So we have here 20,437 for Cafe Americano. This means that when we sell 20,437 for Cafe Americano, 22,795 of Latte Monday, 23,581 units of ACCAFE Signature Coffee, 19,651 units of Coffee Caramel, 7,860 ACCAFE Pretzels, 9,432 Beef Overload Bun, and 6,288 Nacho Fries, we will get a break-even point since it will equate to our fixed expenses. Therefore, our net operating income for this, in this case, would be 0. So that's all for the computation of break-even point in unit sales for ACCAFE Express. Thank you.
At this point, we'll be computing the break-even point in peso sales of ACCAFE Express. So when we say break-even point in peso sales, this is a multi-product break-even analysis in ACCAFE Express. So in order to find the break-even point in peso sales of ACCAFE Express, we need to go to the 3 steps. So first is identifying the contribution margin ratio. Second is the determining the weighted average contribution margin ratio. And lastly, to allocate the break-even point for each product. So here we have the formula in order to compute the contribution margin ratio. So we only need to divide contribution margin from selling price. So we have the table here, which is the contribution margin format table in units. The contribution margin ratio are the following. Cafe Americano, so we have 50 pesos divided by 120 pesos. We have the 42% as its contribution margin ratio. For Latte Monday, we have 30 pesos divided by 130 pesos. We have the 23%. ACCAFE Signature Coffee, we have 25 divided by 140. We have 18%. For Coffee Caramel, we have 30 divided by 130 pesos. We have 23%. For ACCAFE Pretzels, we have 15 pesos divided by 60 pesos equals to the 25%. And Beef Overload Bun, which is 15 divided by 80 equals to 19%. For Nacho Fries, we have 35 divided by 75. We have 47%. These following percentage are the contribution margin ratio for each product. So after we get this contribution margin ratio for each product, we can now get the weighted average ratio. So in order to get the weighted average ratio, we only need to multiply contribution margin ratio times the annual sales divided by total annual sales. To find the weighted average contribution ratio for each product, these are the following. Cafe Americano, we have 7.88%. For Latte Monday, we have 5.27%. For ACCAFE Signature Coffee, we have 4.55%. Coffee Caramel, we have 4.55%. We have ACCAFE Pretzels, we have 0.91%. We have Beef Overload Bun, we have 1.09%. For Nacho Fries, on the other hand, we have 1.70%. So to find the grand total or the total weighted average contribution margin ratio that we will be using later on, we only need to add all the weighted average contribution margin ratio for each product. So after adding up, we will get the total weighted average that is equal to 25.94%. Since we got the weighted average contribution margin ratio, we can now compute the break-even point in peso sales. So the formula is fixed expenses divided by the weighted average or the total weighted average contribution margin ratio, which is 3,411,360 divided by the 25.94% equals to the 13,150,964. So this 13,150,964, this is our break-even point in sales. So after getting the break-even point in dollars, we can now allocate it for each product. So the formula of allocation is break-even point in pesos times the annual sales divided by total annual sales. So below we can see the table containing the break-even point in sales for each product. So these are the following. Cafe Americano, we have a 2,486,788 pesos. For Latte Monday, we have 3,004,796 pesos. For ACCAFE Signature Coffee, we have 3,347,518 pesos. For Coffee Caramel, we have 2,590,341 pesos. For ACCAFE Pretzels, we have 478,217 pesos. For Beef Overload Bun, we have 765,147 pesos. For Nacho Fries, we have 478,217 pesos. Adding up all these values, we can now get the break-even point in pesos that we computed a while ago, which is equal to 13,150,964